The lights of the San Francisco Grand Tech Summit glimmered like a constellation trapped within the towering glass walls of the Moscone Center. It was July 2025, and the air buzzed with anticipation, a cocktail of ambition and innovation swirling. Among the tech elite, rows of sleek chairs held venture capitalists, journalists, and influencers, their eyes fixed on the stage where James Harper, the 42-year-old founder of Harper Technologies, was about to unveil his latest triumph, a quantum-encrypted AI security platform poised to redefine digital trust. The golden trim of his tailored navy suit caught the light as he stepped to the podium, his presence commanding, his smile practiced yet magnetic. Cameras whirred, live streams flickered across platforms like X, and hundreds of gazes followed. His every move, waiting for the billionaire visionary to shape the future once again. James had done this 100 times before, owned every stage, silenced every skeptic. His company, Harper Technologies, had revolutionized cybersecurity, outmaneuvering competitors and surviving lawsuits that would have buried lesser empires. But tonight, something was different. His voice, usually sharp as a blade, wavered mid-sentence. This platform will not only protect but redefine how he stopped. A hand instinctively pressed against his chest, his brow furrowed, and his stance faltered. The room held its breath. Then, without another word, James Harper collapsed, his body crumpling to the polished stage floor like a marionette with cut strings. Chaos erupted. Gasps ricocheted through the hall. Cameras zoomed in, and assistants shouted for help. Paramedics pushed through the crowd, their urgency slicing through the stunned silence. A distant siren wailed as James was lifted onto a stretcher, his face pale, eyes half open, and within minutes, he was gone, whisked away to St. Mary's Medical Center, leaving behind a room of disbelief and a live stream feed exploding with hashtags. Hashtag Harper collapse, hashtag tech tighten down. On X, posts speculated wildly heart attack, stroke, or something more sinister. The world watched, and the internet roared. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, James woke to the soft beep of machines and the dull ache of fluorescent lights overhead. His body felt heavy, as if gravity itself had doubled. His mouth was dry, his chest tight with a weight he couldn't name. A doctor, Dr. Elena Martinez, entered with a clipboard and a measured expression. Her words were clinical, precise, and final. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, inoperable, 6 months at best. James stared at the ceiling, the words circling his mind like vultures. 6 months. He had built an empire, secured data for governments, outsmarted rivals, and amassed a fortune that could buy anything except time. Dr. Martinez mentioned ongoing trials for immunotherapy in 2025, but the data was grim. No cure, only delays. He nodded, barely hearing her, as the reality settled. His life, his legacy, was slipping away. Back at his Manhattan penthouse, the marble floors echoed under his slow steps. The space was pristine glass railings, granite counters, custom Italian furniture, but it felt like a mausoleum. James tossed his tie onto a leather chair, ignoring the cautious greeting of his housekeeper, Lily Bennett. "Welcome back, sir," she said softly, her voice tinged with concern. He nodded, offering no explanation, and retreated to his study. The silence was deafening, louder than the city's hum outside. Hours passed, the sunset bleeding into night, and James sat staring at nothing, the doctor's words looping endlessly. 6 months. James Harper was no stranger to loss. At 34, he had loved a woman, Claire, who carried his child until a miscarriage shattered them both. She left, blaming him, and he carried that guilt like a shadow. No wife, no children, no parents. His mother and father gone in a car accident a decade ago. His only brother, a corporate lawyer in Chicago, Hadn't spoken to him since a bitter business fallout over Harper Technologies' early days. James had everything: wealth, power, influence, but no one. His empire, once a source of pride, now felt like a hollow trophy. Lily Bennett, 23, moved quietly through the penthouse, arranging fresh flowers in a vase, her presence unobtrusive yet steady. She had worked for James for 3 years, hired after cleaning offices downtown to support her dying grandmother. Lily was no ordinary maid. She was observant, kind, with a quiet strength that came from growing up with nothing. Her dark hair fell in soft waves, her hazel eyes sharp but warm, and her hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with purpose. She dreamed of writing, of telling stories that mattered, but life had kept those dreams locked in a notebook under her bed. James had always noticed her, not as a servant but as a rare flicker of authenticity in his polished world. Tonight, as he watched her from the study doorway, something stirred. A desperate need to leave something behind, something alive. "Lily," he said, his voice low, startling her. She turned, clutching a vase, her expression cautious. "Sir, are you all right?" Her words were gentle, but her eyes searched his, sensing the weight he carried. He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. There was a calm in her presence, a steadiness that wasn't cold, an innocence that wasn't naive. "You've been here 3 years, haven't you?" he asked, stepping closer. She nodded, hesitant. "Yes, sir, since I was 20. Before that, I cleaned offices, took care of my grandmother." Her voice was soft, steady, but her hands tightened around the vase. James gestured for her to follow him to the study. She hesitated, confused, but obeyed, setting the vase down and trailing behind. The room was dark, lined with books and awards, a single lamp casting shadows across his desk. He sat, eyes fixed on the floor, and spoke, his voice barely above. A whisper. "The doctors gave me 6 months. No treatment, no miracle drug. Just time." Lily's breath caught, her eyes widening. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice cracking. James looked up, his gaze piercing but not harsh. "I don't want to die and be forgotten, Lily. I want to leave something behind, something alive. A child." The words hung between them, heavy and electric. Lily froze, her lips parting in disbelief. "Sir, I've never," she stammered, her voice trembling under the weight of his request. He nodded, acknowledging her shock. "I know. I'm not asking for love, Lily. I'm asking for trust. A chance to leave a part of me in this world." She stepped back, her mind racing, her heart pounding. "This isn't something I can decide right now," she said, her voice barely audible. "Of course not," he replied, his tone softer. "Now, take your time." Lily turned and left the study, her steps quick, her knees shaking as she climbed the stairs to her small room. She sank onto the bed, clutching a pillow, her eyes burning with questions. How could she consider this? And yet, something in James's voice, not hunger but grief, made it impossible to dismiss. Downstairs, James remained in his chair, staring at the door she'd disappeared behind. His heart, already fragile, felt heavier than ever. The penthouse, once a symbol of his untouchability, now felt like a tomb. He closed his eyes and whispered into the silence. "Please, Lily, just one chance to outlive me." Outside, Manhattan glittered under a starless sky, but the city's pulse couldn't drown out the storm brewing online. On X, post multiplied. Asterisk, is James Harper dying? Asterisk, what happens to Harper Technologies? Speculation swirled, some calling it a publicity stunt, others a corporate conspiracy. The world didn't know the half of it, but in that quiet penthouse, 2 lives were on the cusp of changing forever. The Manhattan penthouse stood silent under the weight of twilight, its glass walls reflecting the city's restless glow. Inside, the air felt heavy, as if the marble floors and sleek furniture absorbed the gravity of James Harper's diagnosis. 6 months. The words clung to him like damp cloth, inescapable as he sat in his study, the lamplight casting long shadows across his desk. The world outside, churned with speculation X, was ablaze with posts dissecting his collapse at the San Francisco Tech Summit. Hashtags like #HarperDown and #TechLegacy trending with theories ranging from corporate sabotage to a staged exit. None of it mattered. Not the headlines, not the stock market jitters, not the boardroom whispers about Harper Technologies' future. What mattered was time, and James had none left. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers tracing the edge of a framed photo, a rare relic from a decade ago, showing him with Claire, the woman who had almost been his future. They'd been happy once, until a miscarriage stole their unborn child, and her love turned to blame. The guilt had carved a hollow space in him, when he'd filled with work, power, and isolation. No wife, no family, no one to mourn him but employees and shareholders. The thought twisted in his gut. A life spent building an empire, only to die forgotten. He needed someone to carry his name forward, to prove he'd been more than a balance sheet. Across the penthouse, Lily Bennett moved with quiet precision, polishing a crystal vase in the hallway. At 23, she was a shadow in James's world, always present, never intrusive. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, strands escaping to frame her face, and her hazel eyes held a depth that seemed to see beyond surfaces. She'd been with him for 3 years, hired after scrubbing office floors downtown to pay for her grandmother's medical bills. Those days had hardened her, but not her heart. She'd cared for her grandmother until the end, reading poetry by her bedside, dreaming of a day she'd write her own stories. That dream lived in a worn notebook upstairs, filled with half-finished sentences and hopes she rarely spoke aloud. In James's penthouse, she was invisible to most, but to him, she was a quiet anchor, a reminder of something real in a life polished to perfection. James stood, his steps unsteady, and crossed to the hallway where Lily worked. The sight of her arranging Lily with care stirred something in him, a flicker of hope, fragile but fierce. "Lily," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the hum of the city outside. She startled, nearly dropping the vase, her hand steadying it as she turned. "Sir, is something wrong?" Her voice was soft, but her eyes searched his, catching the strain in his posture, the pallor of his skin. He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing the way she stood, calm yet alert, kind yet guarded. "You've been here 3 years, right?" he asked, stepping closer. She nodded, her fingers tightening around the vase. "Yes, sir, since I was 20. Before that, I cleaned offices, took care of my grandmother." Her words were steady, but a flicker of curiosity crossed her face. He gestured toward the study. "Can we talk?" Lily hesitated, her brow furrowing, but set the vase down and followed, her steps cautious. The study was dim, the air thick with the scent of leather and old books. James sat behind his desk, motioning for her to take the chair opposite. She perched on its edge, hands folded in her lap, waiting. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his voice low and deliberate. "The doctors gave me 6 months, Lily. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. No treatment, no cure. Just time." Her breath caught, eyes widening, a hand rising to her mouth. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine sorrow. She'd seen his strength, his command, but now she saw something else. A man unraveling. James held her gaze, his own eyes raw with something she couldn't name. "I've built everything I thought mattered. Harper Technologies. Systems that protect millions, but it's not enough. I don't want to die and be forgotten, Lily. I want to leave something behind, something alive. A child. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the silence. Lily froze, her lips parting, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Sir, I've never," she stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of his request. She'd never been with anyone, never trusted anyone enough to let them close. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, give yourself for love. Lily, not for less. Asterisk, James nodded, as if expecting her shock. "I know," he said softly. "I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for trust. A chance to leave a part of me in this world. Someone to carry my name, my story. You're the only person I trust for this." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying the desperation beneath his calm. Lily's mind raced. She thought of her grandmother, who'd raised her in a Brooklyn walk-up, teaching her to find meaning in small acts of kindness. She thought of James, alone in this gleaming cage of a home, his empire meaningless in the face of death. "This isn't something I can decide right now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her knees shaking as she stood. "Of course not," James replied, his tone gentle but urgent. "Take your time." Lily fled to her small room upstairs, the door clicking shut behind her. She sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching a pillow to her chest, her eyes burning with unshed tears. The proposal was unthinkable, yet it wasn't cruel. James hadn't looked at her with greed or entitlement, but with grief, as if she were his last lifeline. She replayed his words, his expression, the way his voice broke on forgotten. She'd seen him at his lowest sitting alone in the study, staring at that old photo, unaware she'd noticed. He wasn't just her employer. He was a man drowning in his own mortality. But could she give him what he asked? Could she carry a child, his child, knowing it would change her forever? Downstairs, James remained in his chair, staring at the door Lily had left through. The silence of the penthouse was unbearable, louder than the city's pulse. He thought of Claire, the child they'd lost. The way her departure had convinced him he didn't deserve happiness. Lily was different, not just kind, but real, untouched by the ambition that surrounded him. He didn't want her body. He wanted her trust, her strength, to give his life meaning beyond stock prices and patents. He closed his eyes, whispering into the dark, "Please, Lily, just one chance to matter." Outside, Manhattan's skyline glittered, but the city's chatter was louder online. On X, posts multiplied. Asterisk, Harper's hiding something. Cancer? Asterisk, who takes over if he's gone? A viral thread speculated about his collapse, some users digging into his personal life, others debating the ethics of tech billionaires. One post, from an anonymous account, hinted at a secret plan to secure his legacy, sending ripples of curiosity through the platform. Lily, unaware of the digital storm, lay awake, her notebook open but untouched. She'd always believed her first act of intimacy would be for love, not duty. Yet James's plea wasn't about possession, it was about redemption. She closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling like fog, thick and impossible to ignore. The V. Next morning, Lily moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, dusting shelves, avoiding the study. Her mind was a tangle of questions. What would it mean to say yes? To carry a child for a dying man? She thought of her grandmother's funeral, the ache of being alone, and the stories she'd never written. James's request wasn't just about him, it was about her, too. Could she give him this gift without losing herself? As she paused by the glass doors to the penthouse's small garden, she stepped outside, the air cool against her skin. The hydrangeas, heavy with dew, seemed to nod in understanding. She sat on the stone bench, her quiet place, and let herself breathe, searching for an answer she wasn't sure she'd find. The small room above James Harper's Manhattan penthouse was a world apart from the gleaming marble and glass below. Its worn wooden floor creaked under Lily Bennett's steps, and the single window let in a sliver of gray dawn, casting pale streaks across her narrow bed. She hadn't slept. Her eyes, red and dry, stared at the ceiling as James's words replayed like a relentless tide. I don't want to die and be forgotten. Lily, I want to leave something alive. The weight of his request pressed against her chest, heavy as the city's hum outside. At 23, Lily had faced loss, her grandmother's slow fate to cancer, the empty apartment in Brooklyn, but nothing had prepared her for this. A child, his child. The idea was as foreign as the penthouse she cleaned, yet it stirred something deep within her, something she couldn't name. Lily rose, her hands trembling as she folded a shirt twice, not because it needed folding, but because she needed motion to anchor her thoughts. She thought of her grandmother, who'd raised her on stories of sacrifice and kindness, whispering, live for something bigger than yourself, Lily. She thought of James, not the billionaire on magazine covers, but the man she'd seen late. At night, hunched over his desk, staring at a faded photo with eyes that held more grief than triumph. His proposal wasn't about power or possession. It was a plea for meaning, a final grasp at a legacy that could outlive his 6 months. But could she give him that? Could she carry a child, knowing it would tie her to a dying man, to a world that wasn't hers? Downstairs, the penthouse was still, the staff given the morning off. James hadn't emerged from his study, and Lily avoided the hallway leading there, her tasks a quiet ritual to delay the inevitable. She dusted shelves, wiped counters, her fingers moving automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. On X, the digital storm raged on posts speculating about James's health, his company's future, and even his personal life. A viral thread from an anonymous account claimed, Harper's planning something big before he goes. A successor? Another post, sharper, questioned, who's close enough to a tech titan to inherit his empire? The platform buzzed with ethical debates about billionaires and their legacies, some users citing 2025's growing scrutiny of wealth inequality, others defending James's right to secure his name. Lily, unaware of the online chatter, felt the weight of her own scrutiny, a choice that would redefine her life. She paused by the glass doors to the penthouse's small garden, her sanctuary amid the sterile luxury. Stepping outside, she inhaled the cool air, the scent of damp earth and hydrangeas grounding her. The stone bench, tucked between flower beds, was where she'd always come to think, to write fragments of stories in her notebook. Today, she sat, her hands clasped, staring at the petals heavy with dew. She remembered her grandmother's final days, reading poetry to her, promising to live with purpose. She remembered James's voice, raw with grief. I'm asking for trust. The words weren't a demand, they were a confession. He trusted her, not as a servant, but as someone capable of carrying his hope. Lily's thoughts drifted to her own dreams, locked in that notebook upstairs. She'd wanted to write, to tell stories of people like her, those who loved and lost, who found strength in quiet moments. Saying yes to James wouldn't just be about him. It would be about her, too. Could she write a new chapter for herself, one where sacrifice became strength? The garden offered no answers, but its stillness let her breathe, let her feel the edges of a decision taking shape. Back inside, Lily moved through the penthouse, her steps slower now, more deliberate. She passed the study, pausing at the door, her hand hovering above the handle. Not yet. She needed clarity, not just for James, but for herself. Upstairs, she opened her notebook, flipping past half-written poems to a blank page. She wrote, what? Does it mean to give life? Not just to a child, but to someone's hope? The words felt heavy, real, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She closed the notebook and pressed her palms to her eyes, willing the tears to stay at bay that evening. The penthouse dimmed into its usual calm, the city's lights flickering like distant stars. Lily stood before the study door again, her heart pounding louder with every step. This time, she didn't hesitate. She knocked softly and entered. James looked up from his chair, startled but composed, his face paler than she remembered. The lamplight caught the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but they softened when he saw her. "Lily," he said, his voice a mix of hope and fear. She didn't sit, didn't smile, just stood, her hands steady at her sides. "I've thought about it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "All night, all day. I thought about what it means to give someone hope, to carry something bigger than myself. I thought about my grandmother, who taught me to live for others, even when it's hard." She paused, her throat tightening. "I'll do it, James. Not for money, not out of pity, but because I understand what it means to want to leave something that lasts. I'll carry your child." James rose slowly, his expression unreadable, his hands trembling slightly. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes locked on his. "I don't know what tomorrow brings or how I'll feel after, but I know I can't look away from you, not now." The air between them was thick with unspoken questions, but also a fragile trust. James stepped closer, his hand reaching out, then pausing. "Thank you, Lily," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't know what this means." There was no ceremony, no grand gesture. Just two people standing in the quiet space between fear and courage. He reached out again, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch, though her breath hitched, her heart racing with the weight of what she'd promised. Slowly, he leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers, letting the silence speak where words failed. When he kissed her, it wasn't urgent or hungry. It was reverent, like a prayer whispered in the dark. Lily felt the world shift, not because she loved him, but because she'd chosen to carry his hope, to weave her story into his. Later, in the soft glow of his bedroom, Lily stood before a mirror, wrapped in a cotton robe. Her fingers trembled as she untied the sash, letting it fall. James watched her, not with desire but with awe, as if witnessing something sacred. She climbed onto the bed, lying beside him, her hands finding his, their fingers interlacing. He kissed her again, slower, whispering her name like it carried more weight than any he'd ever spoken. Their bodies moved with care, each touch a question, each breath an answer. There was awkwardness, yes, and hesitance, but also a trust neither had expected. When it became too much, when she gasped or trembled, he stopped, his eyes searching. "Hers. I've got you," he whispered, his lips brushing her temple. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to feel human again." Lily nodded through tears, letting go of her fears, her doubts, and giving him the only gift she had, her trust. Afterward, they lay tangled beneath the sheets, the room filled with the sound of their breathing and the low hum of the city outside. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the unsteady rhythm of his heart, fragile but still beating. "Thank you, Lily," he said at last, his voice soft. She didn't reply, but her silence was enough. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid, and he wasn't just a billionaire. They were two people bound by a choice that would outlast them both. Outside, the city churned, oblivious to the quiet revolution in the penthouse. On X, a new post gained traction. Harper's back in his penthouse, but what's he planning? The world didn't know, couldn't know, the weight of the decision made that night. But for Lily, the garden, the notebook, and the man beside her had shifted something permanent. She'd said yes, not to his wealth, not to his power, but to his humanity. And in doing so, she'd begun to rewrite her own story. The Manhattan penthouse, once a fortress of ambition, felt like a hollow shell in the weeks following James Harper's proposal. The air was heavy with unspoken promises, and Lily Bennett moved through her tasks with a quiet resolve. Her decision to carry James's child settling into her bones like a secret too big for words. James, weakened by his illness, spent most days in his study, his energy fading but his eyes still bright when Lily entered with tea or a stack of files. They spoke little, but their silences were comfortable, filled with a trust neither had anticipated. On X, the digital storm raged on posts speculating about James's absence from Harper Technologies board meetings, with hashtags like #HarperLegacy and #TechTitan fading fueling debates about his health and the company's future. One viral thread claimed, *Harper is grooming a secret heir. Who's the mystery figure? The world didn't know that the answer lay in the quiet maid who dusted his shelves. One evening, as summer rain streaked the penthouse windows, James collapsed again, this time in the hallway just steps from Lily's room. His body hit the marble floor with a dull thud, and Lily's scream pierced the silence as she rushed to him, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. Paramedics arrived swiftly, their urgency a stark contrast to the stillness of the penthouse. At Mount Sinai Hospital, the news was grim. A complication from his pancreatic cancer, expected but devastating. Lily sat by his bedside, holding his hand as machines beeped softly, their rhythm a cruel reminder of time slipping away. James, pale and fragile, managed a weak smile. "You gave me hope, Lily," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's enough." By dawn, he was gone, his departure quiet, like a candle snuffed out. Lily stood alone in the hospital room, tears falling silently, the weight of his absence heavier than she'd imagined. Days later, Lily returned to the penthouse, her steps echoing in the empty space. Most of the staff had been dismissed, the board already moving to secure Harper Technologies' future without its founder. Alone in her room, she felt a shift in her body, nausea in the mornings, a heightened sense of smell. Her hands trembled as she counted the weeks, realizing she was late. A trip to a pharmacy in the rain, a test taken in the dim light of her bathroom, and 2 pink lines confirmed it. She was pregnant, James's child. Lily sank to the floor, pressing her palm to her stomach, whispering, "You're here. You're real." The joy was fleeting, overshadowed by the reality of what came next. She was a single mother-to-be, a maid in a world that didn't see her, carrying the heir to a tech empire. The news of James's death broke like a tidal wave. On X, posts exploded. James Harper, tech visionary, dead at 42. Speculation about his will, his fortune, and his legacy dominated feeds, with some users praising his innovations and others criticizing his wealth in a time of 2025's growing wealth inequality debates. A particularly vicious thread called him *a billionaire who died alone. No family, no heirs. Lily read it on her phone, her heart aching at the lie. She was his family now, her child his legacy, but the world didn't know, and soon it would. Try to erase her. The first blow came a week after the funeral, a private affair guarded by Harper Technologies' legal team. Lily stood at the back, unnoticed by James's extended family, his deed, Margaret Harper, and a few distant cousins who eyed her with suspicion. A letter arrived at the penthouse, hand-delivered by a courier, a formal notice from the board, terminating her employment and giving her 2 weeks to vacate. Worse, a second letter followed, summoning her to a meeting with Harper Technologies lawyers. They claimed James's will was ambiguous, with no mention of a child or a partner, and the board intended to freeze his personal assets pending a full audit. Lily's stomach churned. She was invisible to them, a maid, a nobody, yet she carried the truth they refused to see. Desperate, Lily reached out to the only person she could think of, Michael Sullivan, James's former business partner. She'd heard his name in passing, a man who'd helped build Harper Technologies before a falling out years ago. A mutual acquaintance passed along his number, and when Lily called, her voice shaking, Michael listened. "Meet me tomorrow," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We'll figure this out." The next day, in a quiet midtown cafe, Michael arrived, a tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s, his charcoal suit understated but sharp. His eyes, kind but calculating, studied Lily as she explained everything. James's proposal, her pregnancy, the board's threats. She expected skepticism, but Michael's expression softened. "James trusted you," he said. "That's enough for me." Michael revealed a secret that changed everything. A sealed envelope James had entrusted to him months ago, containing a notarized will naming Lily as the primary guardian of his unborn child, referred to as my heir, yet unnamed. The document outlined a trust to support them, modest but secure, and confirmed James's intent with recorded voice memos. "He knew the board would fight this," Michael said, sliding the envelope across the table. "He wanted you protected." Lily's hand shook as she read it, overwhelmed not by the money but by James's foresight, his faith in her. Michael leaned forward. "The board's already moving to challenge this. They'll paint you as an opportunist, Lily, but I'll stand with you." The legal battle began swiftly in a Manhattan courthouse that loomed like a fortress. Lily, dressed in a simple navy dress, sat beside Michael and a lawyer he'd hired, a woman named Sarah Klein, who specialized in inheritance disputes. Across the room, the board's lawyers, polished, relentless, argued that no formal marriage existed, that Lily's claims were unverified, that her child had no legal standing without a DNA test. James's family, led by Margaret Harper, sat stone-faced, their stares cold. Margaret, a formidable woman in her 60s, whispered to a cousin, her words sharp, "She's just a maid." Lily sat motionless, her hands clasped, but inside, she burned with resolve. She thought of James's hand in hers, his whispered promises in the hospital. She wasn't fighting for wealth, she was fighting for his truth. Sarah rose, her voice steady, presenting the timeline of Lily's employment, James's private correspondence, and the envelope from the hospital drawer. The voice memos were played, James's frail voice echoing, "Lily Bennett is my family. My child is my legacy." The room shifted, the board's confidence cracking. Michael took the stand, his testimony unwavering. "I knew James for 20 years," he said. "He became a different man in those final months, someone who found hope in her." He gestured to Lily, his gaze steady. The judge, a woman with silver-rimmed glasses, listened carefully, her expression unreadable. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones raised, cameras flashing. Expos multiplied. Asterisk, who is Lily Bennett? Asterisk, Harper's secret heir reel or scam? A feminist group on the platform championed Lily, arguing her right to autonomy in a world quick to judge, while others branded her a gold digger. Lily ignored it all, shielded by Michael as they left the courthouse. "No statements," he said firmly, guiding her to a waiting car. Inside, she clutched the envelope, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the certainty that she'd dare fight for James's child, no matter the cost. The hearing ended with a partial victory. The judge ordered a DNA test to confirm paternity, but upheld the trust's validity pending results. Lily returned to the penthouse, now half empty, packing. James's shirts, their faint cologne a reminder of the man she'd known. She found a note in his study, tucked in a book. Asterisk, Lily, you gave me more than I deserved. Thank you. Asterisk, tears fell as she folded it into her pocket. A piece of him she'd carry forward. The world outside might doubt her, but she knew the truth. She was carrying his legacy, and no one could take that away. The late summer light filtered through the windows of Lily Bennett's new home, a modest two-bedroom cottage near the Hudson River, its walls painted soft green to match the nursery she'd begun preparing. The Manhattan penthouse was a memory. Now, its marble floors and glass railings replaced by creaking hardwood and a small backyard where hydrangeas bloomed. Lily, now 3 months pregnant, moved carefully through her days, her body adjusting to the subtle weight of new life. The victory in the courthouse, a temporary recognition of her unborn child, as James Harper's heir had secured her a modest trust, enough to buy this home and start over. But the world outside was far from settled. On X, posts swirled with speculation. Asterisk, who is Lily Bennett, the maid-turned-heiress? Hashtags like #HarperHeir and #TechLegacy fueled debates, some praising her as a symbol of resilience, others branding her a schemer. Lily avoided her phone, focusing instead on the crib she assembled, the soft blankets she folded, and the quiet hope growing inside her. Michael Sullivan had become a constant presence, not out of obligation but something unspoken, something steady. At 58, he carried the calm of a man who'd seen betrayal. His fallout with James over Harper Technologies' early expansion had left scars, but also the warmth of someone who'd learned to value loyalty. He'd visit unannounced, bringing fresh bread from a local bakery or a book he thought Lily might like. Today, he stood in her kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, attempting to fix a leaky faucet while Lily chopped vegetables for dinner. "You're hopeless with tools," she teased, a rare smile breaking through her fatigue. Michael grinned, wiping his brow. "I built a tech empire, but plumbing's my kryptonite." Their laughter, light and unguarded, filled the small space, a contrast to the weight of the past months. Their connection had grown slowly, rooted in shared moments rather than grand gestures. Michael had been there at the courthouse, his presence a shield against the board's cold stares. He'd sat with her in the hospital waiting room, his hand steady on her shoulder as James slipped away. Now, he asked about her childhood in Brooklyn, her grandmother's poetry, the stories she wanted to write. Lily, hesitant at first, began to open up, sharing fragments of her life, the nights she'd read to her grandmother, the dreams she'd tucked away in her notebook. "I always wanted to write about people like me," she said one evening, stirring tea as Michael listened. "People who keep going, even when life breaks them." He nodded, his eyes soft. "You're already living that story, Lily." But beneath the warmth, Lily wrestled with guilt. Accepting James's child had been an act of compassion, but feeling something from Michael felt like a betrayal. Late at night, she'd lie awake, her hand resting on her barely there bump, wondering if moving forward meant letting go of James. She thought of his voice, frail but hopeful. "You gave me hope, Lily." Could she honor that hope while building a new life? Michael sensed her hesitation, never pushing, always waiting. Once, when she'd fallen asleep on her couch after a long day, she woke to find a blanket tucked around her, a note on the table. Asterisk rest. "Lily, you don't have to do this alone." Asterisk, the gesture, small but deliberate, chipped away at her walls. The few challenges of impending motherhood loomed large. Mornings brought nausea, and the cost of prenatal care weighed on her, even with the trust. In 2025, single mothers face scrutiny, their choices dissected on platforms like X, where posts debated Lily's legitimacy. Asterisk, a maid carrying a billionaire's kid. Sounds like a movie plot. Asterisk, others from feminist groups championed her autonomy, citing the growing movement for women's rights in reproductive decisions. Lily ignored the noise, but the isolation of her new reality was real. She'd left behind the penthouse staff, her old life, and the community she'd known in Brooklyn. The cottage was her sanctuary, but it was also a reminder of how alone she felt until Michael showed up. One afternoon, as they sat on the back porch, the Hudson River glinting in the distance, Michael asked about her favorite book. "To Kill a Mockingbird," she said, her voice soft. Scout's courage, Atticus's quiet strength, it always felt like a guide. Michael nodded, his gaze distant. James loved that book too. Said it reminded him of what he wanted to be, someone who stood for something. The mention of James tightened Lily's chest. She wanted to ask about their fallout, the years of silence, but instead she said, "Tell me about him, before everything." Michael leaned back, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "We were like brothers once. Built Harper Technologies. From nothing. But I pushed for aggressive expansion, and he wanted control. It broke us. I didn't see him again until he called me, months before he got sick, to apologize. I wish I'd listened sooner." The story stirred something in Lily. Michael wasn't just helping her because of James. He was redeeming his own past. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on dreams, losses, and the small joys they found in the present. One evening, as they laughed over Michael's failed attempt to make pancakes, flour dusted across his shirt, the kitchen smelling of burnt batter, Lily felt a warmth she hadn't known since her grandmother's days. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something tender, something real. She caught Michael watching her, his eyes bright, and for a moment, she let herself imagine a future where she wasn't alone. But doubt lingered. One night, after Michael left, Lily sat in the nursery, rocking in a chair she'd bought secondhand. The room was half finished, a mobile of stars hanging above the crib. She thought of James's hand in hers, his whispered thanks. "I'm trying to honor you," she said aloud, her voice breaking. "But what if I'm failing?" The question hung unanswered, but the stars above the crib seemed to twinkle, a silent reassurance. She opened her notebook, writing, "Asterisk, maybe hope isn't just for him. Maybe it's for me. Asterisk. The words felt like a step forward, a permission to live beyond her promise. Michael's visits became a rhythm: coffee in the mornings, walks by the river, stories shared over dinner. He never crossed the line, never asked for more than she could give, but his presence was a constant, like the Hudson's steady flow. One evening, as they sat on the porch, the air cool with the promise of fall, Lily spoke softly. "I'm scared, Michael. Not just of being a mom, but of this." She gestured between them. "What if I'm betraying him?" Michael's eyes met hers, steady and kind. "James wanted you to live, Lily, not just survive. If he saw you now, he'd be proud of how fiercely you're holding on." The words landed like a balm, easing the guilt she'd carried. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. On X, the narrative around Lily shifted. A viral post from a women's advocacy group read, "Lily Bennett is more than a headline. She's a woman, fighting for her child's future." Comments poured in, some supportive, others cruel, but Lily didn't see them. She was too busy building a life, one where the nursery walls held her hope, where Michael's laughter filled the silence, and where the child growing inside her was a bridge between the past and a future she was just beginning to imagine. As she tucked a blanket into the crib, she whispered to her unborn child, "We're going to be okay, Lucas. I promise." The name felt right, a nod to James's legacy, but also to her own strength, a strength she was only beginning to understand. The autumn air carried a crisp edge as Lily Bennett stepped out of her cottage, her breath visible in the morning chill. Her navy coat hugged the gentle curve of her belly, now visible at 5 months pregnant. The Hudson River glimmered in the distance, a quiet reminder of the life she was building for her son, Lucas. The initial legal victory had secured his place as James Harper's heir, but the peace it brought was fragile. On X, the narrative around her twisted daily. Some posts hailed her as a symbol of resilience. Others painted her as a cunning opportunist. A trending thread read, *Lily Bennett's playing a long game. Is the hashtag Harper Air real or a grab for power? Lily ignored the noise, her focus on the nursery she painted, the soft greens a promise of hope. But hope, she was learning, came with a price. The first sign of trouble arrived on a gray October morning, delivered by a courier in a tailored suit. The envelope bore the seal of a prominent New York law firm, its contents a summons that made Lily's heart sink. Robert Harper, James's estranged cousin, had filed a challenge to the trust, signing a clause requiring updated DNA results from the child after birth to confirm paternity. Without it, he argued, the inheritance could be voided. The claim wasn't just legal, it was personal. Robert, a hedge fund manager with a reputation for ruthless ambition, had been absent during James's illness, but now saw an opportunity to seize control of Harper Technologies' assets. Lily clutched the letter, her hands trembling. She'd fought once, but this felt different. A storm aimed not just at her, but at her unborn son. Michael Sullivan arrived that afternoon, his face darkening as he read the summons. "This isn't about truth," he said, his voice low. It's about power." Roberts always envied James's success. He sat with Lily at her kitchen table, the scent of coffee grounding their tension. Michael had become her anchor, his visits a steady rhythm in her life. But this new challenge stirred fear in Lily, not of losing the trust, but of the public scrutiny it would bring. On X, posts were already speculating. Another Harper family fight? Hashtag legacy drama. A feminist group countered. Leave Lily Bennett alone. She's a mother, not a pawn. The platform's debates reflected 2025's polarized climate, where wealth disputes fueled public fascination and judgment. Desperate for answers, Lily agreed to meet David Walsh, James's former legal advisor, who contacted her unexpectedly. They met in a quiet Brooklyn diner, its vinyl booths and neon lights a stark contrast to the penthouse she'd left behind. David, a wiry man in his 50s with tired eyes, slid a folder across the table. "You need to see this," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Not to hurt you, but because James wanted you to know everything." Inside were handwritten letters, some addressed to James, others unsent, and a grainy photograph of James with a young woman, both smiling, her hand resting on a barely there bump. Lily's heart stilled. "This isn't what you think," David said quickly. Her name was Claire. She lost their child before delivery, and it broke them. James blamed himself, carried that guilt for years. "It's why he was so careful with you." Lily read the letters in fragments, each one a window into James's pain. One, dated years ago, read, "I failed you, Claire. I don't deserve another chance." Another, written months before his death, was addressed to Lily. "You've given me hope I thought I'd lost. Thank you for seeing me. The photograph trembled in her hands. She'd known James was haunted, but this made it real, a man who'd loved fiercely, lost deeply, and found redemption in her. "He left these with me before his surgery," David said. "Said if anything happened, you deserved the truth." Lily nodded, her throat tight, empathy outweighing the sting of betrayal. James hadn't hidden Claire to deceive her. He'd protected her from his own wounds. That evening, Lily shared the folder with Michael, the fire crackling softly in her living room. He listened, his eyes never leaving hers, as she recounted David's words. "Truth doesn't erase what you had," he said, his voice steady. "It makes it more real. You helped him heal, Lily." His words eased the ache in her chest, but the legal battle loomed. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived, Margaret Harper, James's aunt. Lily opened the door to find the older woman, elegantly dressed in a tailored coat, her eyes sharp but softer than at the funeral. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said bluntly, stepping inside. "I believed the board's lies, thought you were just a story. But I've watched you, how you've carried yourself. You've shown more grace than most of us ever did." Margaret reached into her purse, pulling out a small velvet box. "James bought this a week before he died," she said, handing it to Lily. "He asked me to keep it, just in case." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a sapphire pendant, Lily's birthstone, September. Engraved inside the box was a note, "A future worth choosing." Lily's eyes burned. The words a quiet echo of James's hope. "He saw something in you," Margaret said. "So do I." The apology, the gift, shifted something in Lily. She wasn't just fighting for Lucas. She was fighting for the man James had become, the one who'd trusted her to carry his legacy. The legal battle intensified. Michael coordinated with Sarah Klein, their lawyer, gathering documents and preparing for the hearing. Ex-posts escalated, some from Robert's allies smearing Lily. A maid with no proof, why trust her? Others, from supporters, rallied. Lily's fighting for her son's name. #stand with Lily. The platform's influence mirrored 2025's reality, where public opinion could sway legal outcomes. Lily felt the pressure, her mornings filled with nausea, her nights with doubt. She visited James's grave, Lucas's weight, a comfort against her chest. "I'm trying to protect him," she whispered to the stone. "But it's harder than I thought." The wind carried her words, and she felt a flicker of James's presence, urging her to keep going. Michael's support was unwavering. He visited often, not just for legal updates, but to sit with her, to ask if Lucas had kicked yet. One evening, after a grueling meeting with Sarah, Lily fell asleep on Michael's couch, waking to find a blanket over her and a note. "You're not alone, Lily." The gesture, small but profound, made her smile a rare lightness amid the storm. She began to notice the way Michael softened when he spoke to her, the way he listened without rushing her. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a bond forged in loyalty, in shared grief, in the quiet promise of something more. As the hearing approached, Lily prepared herself, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a maid or a mother, she was a woman who'd made a choice, one that tied her to James's legacy and her own strength. The sapphire necklace hung around her neck, a reminder of the future she'd promised to build. With Michael by her side, she faced the courthouse steps, the weight of the challenge ahead balanced by the truth she carried within her. Lucas was real, and no one, not Robert, not the board, could erase that. The Manhattan courthouse stood like a sentinel under a pale November sky, its stone pillars casting long shadows across the marble steps. Lily Bennett, now 6 months pregnant, stood at the entrance, one hand resting lightly on her belly, the other gripping a file of documents Michael Sullivan had helped prepare. Her navy dress, simple but elegant, hugged her frame, and the sapphire necklace, James Harper's final gift, glinted at her throat. The weight of the impending hearing pressed against her, but so did the truth she carried. Lucas, her son, was James's legacy, and no one would erase him. Michael stood beside her, his charcoal suit crisp, his presence a quiet anchor. "You're ready," he said, his voice steady. Lily nodded, her eyes resolute. She wasn't the maid who'd once trembled in James's penthouse. She was a mother, a fighter, and she was done being invisible. Inside, the hearing room was smaller than expected, its oak walls amplifying the tension. Robert Harper's lawyers, polished and predatory, sat opposite, their eyes sharp with strategy. Robert himself, a wiry man in his 40s with a permanent scowl, whispered to his team, his ambition palpable. Behind them, James's extended family, including Margaret Harper, watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. The judge, The same woman with silver-rimmed glasses from the first hearing called the session to order, her gaze cutting through the room's theatrics. Robert's team struck first, their arguments a barrage of legal jargon. No formal marriage, no public acknowledgement of Lily, no DNA confirmation from the unborn child. They painted her as a schemer, a maid who'd manipulated a dying man. Lily sat still, her hands clasped, but her heart burned. She thought of James's voice, frail but fierce. Asterisk, you're my family. Lily. Asterisk Sarah Klein. Their liar rose with calm precision. She presented the notarized will, James's voice memos, and new DNA results from prenatal testing, irrefutably confirming James as Lucas's father. She outlined James's intent, his private correspondence, and Michael's testimony about his final months. Then, unexpectedly, Margaret Harper asked to speak. The room hushed as she took the stand, her posture regal, but her voice soft. "I was wrong about Lily," she said, her eyes meeting Lily's. "I thought she was an opportunist, but she's shown more loyalty to James's memory than any of us. He chose her for a reason." The admission shifted the room's air. Robert's confidence faltering. Lily took the stand last, her voice steady despite the eyes boring into her. "I didn't come for fortune," she said, her words clear and thick with emotion. "I came so my son can know his father, carry his name with pride, not secrecy. I love James for the man he became when everything else was gone, a man who believed in hope. I said yes to him because I believed in that hope, too." She paused, her hand resting on her belly. "If I raise Lucas alone, I will. But I won't let the world erase his father." The courtroom fell silent, even Robert's lawyers shifting uncomfortably. The judge's eyes softened, papers shuffled, and after what felt like hours, she spoke. "This court recognizes Lucas Harper, carried by Lily Bennett, as the biological and legal heir of James Harper. The trust is reinstated per his private will." A gasp rippled through the room, not from Lily, who stood still, eyes closed in silent thanks, but from Robert's team, who realized they'd lost not just a case but control. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, X-posts exploding. Asterisk #Harper heir confirmed. Lily Bennett wins. Supporters on the platform cheered. Asterisk, she fought for her son and won. #Justice for Lily. Others, aligned with Robert, sneered. A maid with a billionaire's kid? Still smells like a scam. Asterisk Michael shielded Lily, his hand gentle but firm. "No statements," he said, guiding her to a car. Inside, Lily exhaled, the sapphire necklace warm against her skin. She'd done it, not with rage, but with truth. Months later, spring bloomed along the Hudson, and Lily's cottage hummed with new life. Lucas Harper was born on a warm July morning, his dark hair and serious eyes a mirror of James's. Lily held him, tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispered, "You're here, Lucas. You're loved." Michael, pacing outside, entered when she called, his breath catching at the sight. "Meet Lucas Harper," she said, offering the baby. He took him with reverence, whispering, "Welcome, little man." The moment was quiet, sacred, a promise. Kept. Life settled into a gentle rhythm. Lily and Michael married in a small backyard ceremony under a magnolia tree, its petals falling like soft blessings. Her mother, a quiet woman with steady hands, arranged lemon cake and tea sandwiches, humming as she worked. The guest friends, a few neighbors, and Margaret Harper cheered as Lily, in a cream gown, vowed not perfection but presence. Lucas squealed in his grandmother's arms, his laughter rising above the applause. That evening, under fairy lights, Lily and Michael stood beneath the magnolia, his arms around her. "You taught me love isn't about fixing what's broken," he said, "but building something new." She smiled, her fingers brushing his cheek. "It's a choice we make every day, especially the hard ones. Lily started a writing studio in her neighborhood, helping women shape their stories into memoirs, giving voice to those silenced by grief or shame. Michael returned to business, not for profit but purpose, mentoring startups with a focus on ethical tech in 2025's shifting landscape. Together, they raised Lucas with love, his giggles filling the cottage, his tiny hands reaching for the stars above his crib. One afternoon by the Hudson, Lily watched Lucas chase a butterfly, his steps unsteady but joyful. She turned to Michael, her voice soft. "Do you think about James? How this all started?" He nodded, his eyes on the river. "Every day, not with regret, but gratitude. Without him, I wouldn't have found you." Lily exhaled, her heart full. "He left us pieces of himself, not just Lucas, but the courage he gave me." Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real. Born from loss, shaped by choice, and carried forward by love. Lily wrote a letter to Lucas, tucked in his nursery, telling him of his father, a man who'd built empires but found meaning and hope. As she turned off the nursery light, she smiled, knowing love, when earned and chosen, builds something eternal. This story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the power of compassion, and the courage to build anew from loss. Lily's journey from a maid invisible to the world to a mother and wife who reshapes her. Destiny shows that strength isn't loud or grand, but quiet, persistent, and rooted in love. James's vulnerability, Michael's loyalty, and even Margaret's redemption remind us that humanity shines brightest in moments of connection, when we choose to see and support one another. The story teaches us that legacy isn't about wealth or power, but about the lives we touch, the hope we nurture, and the choices we make to carry forward. In 2025, where social media amplifies voices, but also judgment, Lily's triumph is a call to embrace empathy over division, to fight for truth with grace. For more stories that celebrate the beauty of human resilience and the legacies we leave behind, subscribe to Legacy Stories on your favorite platform. Join our community to discover narratives that inspire, challenge, and remind us what it means to be human. Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe today.